Do you remember reading A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park?
I think this book would connect young generation to understand what the world is like, the world that is not their world. To step in there to see, really? People are struggling somewhere that cannot get clean water in their house?
That's Selva Dutt, and A Long Walk to Water is his story. Selva is a co-founder of Water for South Sudan, a nonprofit organization making water accessible to the South Sudanese people. The book documents Selva's life from the 80s up to 2008 as he flees from war, leaving behind his home, his family, and water.
It was sort of the stereotypical, what can one person do? That's what I wanted to demonstrate with this book.
That's Linda Sue. She's also the author of Naya's Long Walk, One Step at a Time, A Single Shard, Prairie Lotus, and most recently, Gracie Under the Waves. When A Long Walk to Water came out in 2010, she was just happy that someone other than her mother was buying it.
The fact that it has been read by so many readers, that's like a dream come true for a writer, right? But there was a second component that I did not anticipate, which is how young readers responded on a practical level, not just on an emotional level.
Author Jasmine Warga actually taught A Long Walk to Water in her classroom. She was a sixth grade teacher at the time. She's the author of Other Words for Home, A Rover's Story, A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall, and more. She witnessed the impact of the book on her students firsthand.
I feel like my students had lots of questions about it because it was a part of the world that they had never really considered. I think many of them had never even maybe heard the country named Sudan before. And so they had lots of questions about where it was. And then I think had lots of questions about whether issues of water scarcity took place in other parts of the world and how common is that for kids to worry about that.
And how common is it for kids to try to change that? I'm Lisa DeSaro, and this is Remember Reading. It was in the early 2000s when Linda Sue's husband, Ben Dobbin, got word of Selva's clean water efforts in South Sudan.
So it was my husband who met Selva first. He is retired now, but he was a journalist for more than 30 years. And he came home in 2003 and said, I met somebody really interesting, and I think you should meet them too.
So Linda Sue and Ben invited Selva to a party.
Well, it was elephant party. That was the first time to meet Linda Sue.
Selva is talking about the fact that in 2003, we invited him to our annual White Elephant Party, where we, after Christmas, where we exchange, particularly unwanted or funny gifts. And as I recall, he received a set of tap lights, which are battery operated and very useful in South Sudan, and also a set of curtain weights shaped like chickens. I do not know if he has found as much use for them.
In South Sudan, where running water and electricity are outside the norm, battery-operated lights can mean light to study or work or do anything that would require light after dark. Linda Sue describes Selva as having a kind of charisma usually wasted on celebrities. He puts it to better use, she says.
And within a few minutes of meeting him and talking to him, people have a pretty universal response, which is, what can I do to see more of this guy? What can I do to help this guy? How can I become involved in what he thinks is important? Ben's stories went out on the Associated Press wire, but, it was mostly read by adults. And I'm like, no, young people need to read this story. How can I, I write books for young people. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So she did. When Selva's story begins, South Sudan is not yet an independent country. The Second Sudanese Civil War has been in full swing between the North and the South for 2 years. The government of the predominantly Muslim North wants to unite Sudan as an Islamic nation. The South wants independence. Everyone wants water. The year is 1985. Selva is an 11-year-old boy of the Dinka tribe. He's at school when war comes to his village. His teacher tells him and the other boys, run.
When he got to the door, he looked out. Everyone was running. Men, children, women carrying babies. The air was filled with dust that had been kicked up by all those running feet. Some of the men were shouting and waving guns. Salva saw this with one glance. Then he was running too, running as hard as he could, unto the bush, away from home.
That's how Salva became one of the 20,000 lost boys of South Sudan, or so they were named by the American media. You might have seen a headline or two about it, maybe in the early 2000s. Salva, and those who traveled with him, faced extremes most of us hopefully never will. Starvation, thirst, gunfire. Their story is harrowing, but gripping. And importantly, it brings the reader back to something we often tend to avoid: bad news.
At any given moment, there's a lot going on in the world. And a lot of it can be bad, And I think that these days, especially when you watch the news, you don't want to become numb to it. But it can be sort of one disaster or one awful story or one terrible thing on the news after another. And as a sort of protective mechanism, we distance ourselves. We have to, or you would kind of drown in misery.
There's a way to fix that, though, Linda Sue says.
I think one of the really important things is to have some kind of personal connection to what's going on, because then it becomes personal to you, and you have a different response than numbness or distance. So what Meeting Salva did was turn the Lost Boys of Sudan from a news headline into something personal. Now, I knew someone who had been through that, who knew many people who had been through that.
In Houston, Texas, where migration stories are of unique relevance, Jasmine's students had an immediate connection to Salva's story.
I think they were also really struck by Salva being separated from his entire family and then joining this collection of other lost children. And I think this idea of migration and being lost were things that were talked about in their families in some ways. So it was an interesting student group to have these conversations with their experiences being very, very different.
Stories of migration and displacement aren't uncommon, but they weren't always especially visible in places like the U.S. Maybe because we aren't looking at the news, or because of our own xenophobia, or because it just didn't get media attention. But stories like Salva's may give students a new way to think about, talk about, and situate their personal and cultural histories. It may even offer them a sense of visibility, of being seen. Early in Salva's journey, he's surprised and lucky to find his uncle among the displaced. You only need to walk as far as those bushes, his uncle tells him. Then, to that rock over there. Then, just a bit further. Salva walks, one step at a time, toward Ethiopia. When Salva's uncle is killed during a run-in with armed men from the rival Nuer tribe, Salva is devastated. In a group of 20,000 boys and men, he is alone. And after a grueling journey, they make it to the Etang refugee camp in Ethiopia.
When I left my home, I thought that there would be a short way that I would go back and be with my relative again, with my family, but it didn't happen. And now we were chased away again in Ethiopia, thinking that would I still find a way to go home and be with my family? It didn't happen.
Salva is 16 when the camp in Ethiopia closes. Salva and the other refugees are chased out of Ethiopia by armed Nuer men. Many don't make it out alive. For those who remain, they decide to go to Kenya, where its rumored refugee camps are still up and running. It's Salva they choose to follow all the way there. A year and a half later, Salva and over 1,200 boys and men arrive at the camp. And at 22, 11 years after his journey begins, he gets selected to move to the States. Salva was going to Rochester, New York.
Of course, U.S. is a great country, and wherever you are in this world, you heard about good thing, not bad thing about America, especially freedom. You will work, you will have your life the way you want to. That's beautiful news.
There was other news, though.
The other news, bad news, mixed emotion, a scary one. I'm going to US. I never been there. Would I be able to come back again and meet with my family that I've been yearning for so long? And what would happen to me in US? I don't know anyone there. I have no people. I don't know the culture. Would I still be in refugee camp again? Would I will be really free, like the way I heard that, yes, there's a freedom there? Where would I be? Yes, would I still find a way to connect myself back home? Would I manage to come back again?
When Selva lands in the U.S., he meets his new adoptive family. They give him a big, puffy jacket, which is kind of confusing. Why on earth would he need that? Then Selva feels the cold for the first time. He is definitely not in Kenya anymore.
Apparently, it was possible to survive in such cold temperatures, and now he understood the need for the awkward padded jacket. Selva stood still inside the terminal doors for a few moments. Leaving the airport felt like leaving his old life forever. Sudan, his village, his family. Tears came to his eyes, perhaps from the cold air blowing in through the open doors. His new family was already outside. They turned and looked back at him. Selva blinked away the tears and took his first step into a new life.
Jasmine's book, Other Words for Home, explores what it means to come to America as a young refugee, in this case, from Syria. Her name is Jude. Jasmine's family is Palestinian Jordanian, but their closest family friends are Syrian American. They inspired her to write the book in 2013 when Syria was on the brink of a civil war.
In August of 2013, I came back to Cincinnati to visit my parents and went to dinner at the family friend's house. And at this dinner, I was introduced to all of these relatives from their family that I never met before that I learned had just come to Cincinnati from Syria because of the growing conflict. And I was thinking, like, what would it be like for me if my cousins from Jordan had come to live with me when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade? Would I have been welcoming to them? And the answer is probably not, which is a horrible thing to say. But at that time in my life, I was very much like Sarah, the American cousin in the book, of being very confused and ashamed of my identity.
Sarah is Jude's Syrian American cousin who has all the markers of American life and identity. The clothes, the pop culture. She's kind of popular at school, too. Sarah isn't very kind to Jude at first. For her, anything that might be outwardly telling of her Syrian heritage is annoying or weird. This is, of course, a kind of protective measure, because in Sarah's American middle school world, being different is bad. And in that world, to be from the Middle East would certainly be too different. But Jasmine's description of Jude's life in Syria in the first chapters of the book tell us otherwise.
When we talk about Syria, we only ever see these sort of bombed out photos of Aleppo. We don't see Aleppo before, like the vibrant city that it was and hopefully will be again. And I think that because of that, we sort of steal empathy from the viewer because there's this idea that these people we don't understand what they've lost.
The novel is from Jude's perspective, and it's told in verse. It's in the dazzlingly alive imagery of Jude's first home, her Syrian home, that we learn what Jude loses when war reaches her doorstep.
So it was really important for me at the beginning of the book that while Jude's life is obviously going to be different than a lot of American readers' lives, I think there's going to be hallmarks of it that they're going to recognize. If she goes to school and she has friends and she's having her afternoon snack, and that she lives in this resort town part of Syria, this idea that it would be like if suddenly Florida or Santa Barbara became a war zone. And what does that look like?
We can imagine what that might look like. And stories like Jude's and like Salva's can aid us in fostering a deeper empathy in ourselves, if we're willing to put ourselves in their shoes. Jude and Salva are going to America, and they're learning, one step at a time, what their new lives will look and feel like, and who they want to become. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, another little girl is fetching water in the desert heat. In A Long Walk to Water, Salva's story parallels Naya's. It's 2008. Naya is a girl from the Nuer tribe. Among the Nuer, her name is pronounced Nya. Salva, being of the Dinka tribe, pronounces it Naya. Naya's story, unlike Salva's, is fictional.
Have you ever met Naya? That's a question from a student. Say, well, I never met Naya. It's a fiction there. If you go to South Sudan, you will never find Naya there. But my story is real. But Naya represent the other girls that were in the same shoes that represent that name.
Because A Long Walk to Water might be difficult for very young readers, Linda Sue worked with an illustrator to make a version that wouldn't be. The picture book tells a shorter, illustrated version of Naya's story. It's called Naya's Long Walk, One Step at a Time.
I just remember at some point that the publisher contacted me and said, what would you think of Brian Pinkney as an illustrator? And I probably screamed,
Brian Pinkney is the author and illustrator behind Hey Otter, Hey Beaver, Time for Kenny, Brandon and the Baby, and many more.
And the emotional quality I wanted was that feeling of what is it like to have to care for your younger sibling like that.
Naya, like other girls in her village, spends most of her days making the trek to collect water from the nearest pond or in the dry season to the lake a 3 days journey away. Because the water they collect isn't treated, illness is common. And when Naya has to take her sister Akir with her on the journey, Akir becomes sick, and they're in the middle of nowhere. Now, Naya has to carry the water and her sister.
My favorite illustration, this is often the case, is the close-up where her sister's on her back and you can see both their faces and the weight of her on her back with the water. So that was important to me.
Brian wanted to capture that sense of responsibility. It reminds him of the responsibility he felt for his own brother, though under more comfortable circumstances.
And it's nowhere near as extreme as that. When I was I was 8, I would walk my youngest brother to school, to kindergarten, in Boston, downtown Boston. So it was like, I just remember, one day he was crying and I was like holding his hand and walking down the street with him and feeling very honored to have that role. And also that responsibility was real and palpable.
Naya and her family do find help for Akir at a clinic a few days' walk away. It's a risky journey, but not taking it would be riskier. Like Salva, they take it one step at a time. It's in Naya's chapters we learn about Salva's present-day work. Men bring a big drill to her village, a drill for a well. She calls it an iron giraffe. That's what the Iron Giraffe Challenge is named for. Schools who sign up to raise funds for Water for South Sudan might even win a call with Linda Sue or Salva. Since its inception, students have raised millions of dollars to support the Sudanese. None of that could have happened without Salva. Salva had been in the States for 6 years when he got news. His father was alive. Salva visits him in the UN clinic where he's recovering from stomach surgery. On the way back to America, he gets an idea.
An idea came to him. An idea of what he might be able to do to help the people of Sudan. Could he do it? It would take so much work. Perhaps it would be too difficult. But how would he know unless he tried?
I asked Salva how many wells Water for South Sudan has drilled to date.
Since we start drilling, we have over 600 wells right now. And it's not just that alone, helping South Sudanese. Right now we have a war too in Sudan. And they came to South Sudan refugee camp and the UN asked us to help there too. And we help thousands and thousands of people in refugee camp too, for Sudanese that were coming in.
Water for South Sudan is expanding. And with their Water Institute, Water for South Sudan is also teaching the South Sudanese how to operate and maintain their wells and take strong safety measures against waterborne illnesses.
You need to make sure those wells are going to function for a long, long, long time until other changes come along the line. And we are working on nutrition to make sure, because over there we have a dry season that is, 6 months you cannot get any green thing. And imagine the pregnant woman that need iron to eat. For her to be healthy, we are providing that nutrition too. And we even went farther. We are using the solar more to pump the water and distribute connecting the water to be able to do irrigation of growing the crops. We are working in sanitation.
The effort to effect so much change at home has been challenging, Selva reminds us. In South Sudan, there's a 6-month window before the rainy season comes, and there's a huge amount of work to do in that short window.
We are doing other things that the community want us under something called WATCH. It's sanitation, hygiene, and water and sanitation. And over there, it gets extreme heat. And imagine yourself, you are over 100 degree all the time outside there, standing next to the rig, doing everything that you are doing, drilling. And it's very challenging. If you have headache, for example, or diarrhea, it's not easy to go to a clinic and pick up, or a pharmacy and pick up whatever you need. No, we have to carry everything. If we run out of supply, then it's now our problem. You have to endure.
Of course, if you aren't close to a well, you can become dehydrated easily. Selva does objectively dangerous work. The results are obvious: less danger and more prosperity for those his wells serve.
The good part of it is after you work that hard and come back next year and see the water has really changed their life there. People are happy and they're using it and they are healthy.
In Naya's story, access to water means the possibility of a schoolhouse, even for the Nuer girls who typically wouldn't get to attend. Now that they wouldn't have to spend every day walking, they would have time to learn. When Linda Sue wrote Selva's story, she didn't intend to inspire readers to action. She just wanted to show them what one person could do. Then all these kids changed her mind.
And I was like, wow, this is this secret resource that people are not using enough. Look what happens. I mean, Selva's readers have literally raised millions of dollars. They are responsible for hundreds and hundreds of wells that are now serving hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions of people, right? Wow, people don't know that young people have this kind of power. They have this ability.
That's why her newest book, Gracie Under the Waves, has such a strong message. The book follows Gracie, a precocious middle schooler with a love of snorkeling. And when she convinces her family that their next vacation should be to a huge snorkeling destination off the coast of Honduras, she meets an unexpected and difficult reality. The oceans, she learns, are dying. When Linda Sue did research for the book, she watched the 2017 documentary Chasing Coral, which covers the death of a huge percentage of the ocean's coral reefs and the efforts to restore them.
I mean, there were indeed tears streaming down my face. And the analogy I most like is, if you live in an area that has lots of plants and trees, which is most of us, even the desert has a lot of plants, what if 90% of them disappeared, got sick, died? People would be up in arms. They would be like, okay, we need a solution to this. These trees and plants are so important to us. Let's get this done. Well, that's what's happening to our oceans, but we don't see it. So there isn't that sense of urgency. And I do want to contribute to that sense of urgency.
It's not easy news to deliver to young people. The book asks us to notice what's happening under the waves. And through Gracie's exploration in Roatan, we receive some instruction. about the reefs, and about how to help them.
And so there is definitely an activism component woven into Gracie's story because we only have one planet. And it's in big trouble. So I think a lot of young people are aware of this. They want ways to be able to help. They want to do these things even more than we do because we're not going to be around in a while, and they still will be, and it will be their problem. I tell young people when I'm talking about these sorts of things that many of us have done the best we can, but the world is in big trouble, and they have to fix it. And sorry that we're leaving you such a mess, but you do have to fix it. So start figuring out how to do that now, and Gracie's story is offering them one way to think about that.
It's difficult to identify a number that will make someone move, Jasmine and Linda Sue suggest. It might be a number of lost boys in South Sudan or a number of species now extinct. But stories like Salva's, Naya's, Jude's, and now Gracie's ask us, what will it take to make us move? It might just begin with paying attention to the world around us. In Jasmine's newest book, A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall, she explores the power of noticing. I asked Jasmine what prompted her to write the book.
I was fascinated by this idea that I think when you go to an art museum, you often see people depicted and we have no idea who these people are, or what their relationship was to the artist, or why the artist chose to depict them.
Rami is a young Lebanese-American boy whose mother works at the Penelope Museum when a painting goes missing. Rami is determined to unravel the mystery of the stolen painting and clear his mother's name from a list of possible suspects.
Our ghostly figure, her name is Blue, and she literally has no idea who she is. But Rami, our main character who can see her, is an almost 12-year-old boy who, in sort of that way of being almost 12, doesn't know who he is.
For Rami and for Blue, being noticed is what starts their journey of self-discovery, not to mention solving the mystery. Rami meets some other friends along the way. Agatha the turtle, who plays a pivotal role in the book, and Vita, Rami's new friend with a penchant for true crime podcasts. Through their kinship, Rami begins to feel, seen.
A big part of the book is, do you see what I see? Have you found what I put there for you in terms of, Rami's mother makes these paintings where people can find unexpected birds in them. Rami is so moved when Vita sees his drawing of Blue and says, yes, that's her, right? This recognition. I think so. It's a little bit of it is a wish. Where you're going to see what I see.
Noticing is powerful. It extends beyond our individual actions. Jasmine, Linda Sue, and Salva remind us that change begins with our own awareness. That awareness of what's under the waves or of the hidden details in a painting or in the daily news can be a catalyst for action, even collective action.
The thing that I would share is all these things happened to me in my life, my journey, where I am now back to this. I see that we are one people in the world no matter what. And it make it really one people. When people put their hand together, their brain together, their energy together, and the kids are raising funding, individuals that are doing everything. It make it happen because we work as a team together and no one can do it alone. Our hand together, it make things happen no matter what, how difficult things are. And I cannot take a credit for that. It's because of all these elements that are involved. That's what make it happen.
Sometimes, Salva still receives cards from young readers who want to help. They're beautiful, he says. Linda Sue still sees Salva from time to time, and she keeps copies of A Long Walk to Water all over her house. On her most difficult days, she hopes it catches her eye and remembers that her worst days are nothing like Salva's long walk. She likes to ask herself, what would Salva do? Salva would have hope. I'm Lisa DeSaro. Thanks for listening. This episode of Remember Reading is produced by my colleagues at HarperCollins, Nellie Kurtzman, Colleen O'Connell, Elba Luz, Ann Hoppy, and Rich Thomas, And special thanks to Podfly for their production support.